She wasn't flashy. She wasn't loud. She didn't walk in with an entourage or wear a name brand plastered across her chest. And yet, when she walked into that luxury boutique, every eye in the room followed her. Not because they knew her, but because something about her presence demanded attention. She was a young black woman, beautiful, tall, graceful, with skin like polished bronze and eyes that shimmered with quiet confidence. She wore simple jeans, a plain white tee, clean sneakers, no makeup, no jewelry. But it wasn't how she looked that made them start. It was what she was about to do. And one arrogant, self-absorbed lawyer was about to make the biggest mistake of his career. The boutique was nestled in one of the most expensive corners of Manhattan. This wasn't a place people stumbled into. You either belonged there or you didn't. She walked in calmly, like she had every right to be there. Because she did. She didn't browse. She knew exactly what she was looking for. A charcoal gray suit, the kind worn by women in power, women who made decisions, who led, who stood behind courtroom podiums and made grown men tremble. She ran her fingers across the fine Italian wool of a $5,000 suit jacket. That's when he saw her. His name was Mark Donnelly, top criminal defense attorney, partner at Donnelly and Shaw, LLP. Tailored, polished, proud, and completely blind. Blind to his bias, blind to his privilege, blind to who she really was. He watched her from across the boutique like a hawk eyeing a threat. Then he approached. "Excuse me, ma'am," he said, his tone dripping with pretentious charm. "Those suits are quite exclusive." She raised her eyebrows slightly, but said nothing. He stepped closer. "They start at $5,000. Just so you know." Still, she said nothing. "You might want to try somewhere a little more affordable. There's a Macy's just a few blocks down." Her silence didn't come from weakness. It came from calculation. But he wasn't finished. "I mean, no offense," he said, smiling like a crocodile. "It's just people often mistake this place for somewhere else. Happens all the time." She finally spoke, calm, controlled, deadly. "Do you work here?" He blinked. "Excuse me? You seem very concerned with what I can and cannot afford. So, I assumed you worked on commission." "I'm a lawyer," he said proudly, puffing his chest. "I'm just looking out for the store's integrity."
She smiled then, a slow, knowing smile. "Well," she said, "thank you for your concern." And with that, she turned back to the chute. He wasn't done. He followed her, hovering, watching, judging. People come in here all the time pretending they're someone they're not. He muttered, loud, enough for her to hear. She ignored him. "I've defended people like you, you know," he continued. "You don't have to fake it. You can work your way up, just like I did." She turned to face him fully now. "People like me?" she asked. He hesitated. "I mean, people who weren't born into this lifestyle. Who haven't achieved it yet." Achieved what exactly? He gestured around him. "This. Success. Class. Power." Her eyes narrowed, not in anger, but in quiet, devastating understanding. "Tell me, Mr. Lawyer," she said softly. "Do you often follow strangers around in boutiques and make assumptions about their bank account?" "I'm just saying." "No, you're not just saying. You're projecting." He scoffed. "Listen, you don't know who you're talking to." She stepped closer. "Neither do you." And then, like fate had scheduled it perfectly, the store manager came rushing out of the back room, out of breath, clutching a velvet case. "Oh my God, Miss Daniels. I'm so sorry I kept you," Waiting. The lawyer froze. Miss Daniels? The manager continued, almost tripping over himself. Your father called ahead. Said you might be stopping by. I pulled 3 suits for you to choose from, and of course, everything will be tailored within 24 hours. Mark Donnelly went pale. Your father. He repeated. She turned to him, her voice a scalpel. Yes, my father. Chief Justice Daniels. The color drained from his face. She turned to the manager. Has the driver arrived? Yes, He's waiting out front. She turned to Mark one last time. Next time, she said coldly, try not to condescend to the judges. Daughter. And with that, she walked out. Head high. Suit in hand. Dignity untouched. He stood frozen. Silent. Exposed. And as she exited the boutique, passers-by took photos. People whispered. And the story spread. He wanted to believe it was over, that no one would remember. But the internet never forgets. Within 48 hours, the story hit Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. And then, his firm called, and the fallout began. But that was only the beginning. They say karma doesn't wear a watch, but when it shows up, it shows up right on time. Mark Donnelly didn't sleep that night. Not because of guilt, but because of fear. Fear of losing everything he had built. Fear of watching his reputation disintegrate. One share, one retweet, one hashtag at a time. He tried to do damage control. Called a friend at a PR firm. Texted someone he knew at the Post. Even contacted an influencer he once represented, begging for a favor. But it was too late.
At 8:17 a.m., Mark arrived at the firm's headquarters. Normally, he would stride into the building. With swagger, custom suit pressed, leather shoes clicking against marble, nodding smugly at the receptionist. But today he walked like a man on trial. The receptionist didn't look up. No nod, no smile. The elevator ride to the 19th floor was silent, and when the doors opened, they were waiting for him. 3 senior partners, each one seated like a judge on a bench. Close the door, one of them said without looking up. He obeyed. What happened, Mark? That was Mr. Shaw, calm, cold, calculated. Mark tried to spin it. It's being blown out of proportion. She walked in looking, well, let's just say out of place. I was trying to help. You accused the daughter of the Chief Justice of pretending to shop in a store she could afford more than you, Shaw said flatly. Mark swallowed. I didn't know who she was. And that's the problem. Mr. Langley, the oldest partner, leaned forward. She didn't need to be anyone's daughter to deserve basic respect. Mark froze. They weren't defending him. They weren't even neutral. They were disgusted. We've had calls, said Langley. Big ones. Corporate clients. Foundations, university boards, even a Supreme Court judge's assistant. They want distance, Shaw added. From us, from you, Mark panicked. You can't be serious after all I've done for this firm? Langley looked at him, long and hard. All you had to do was mind your business. Mark looked around, desperate. So what now? Shaw opened a folder on the table. You're suspended. Effective immediately. Mark felt his stomach drop. Langley stood up. You'll undergo cultural sensitivity training, community service, media silence. Mark couldn't believe what he was hearing. But what about my clients? They've been reassigned. He opened his mouth to protest. And Mark? Shaw added, standing as well. If you ever embarrass this firm again, you won't be suspended. You'll be replaced. Meanwhile, she hadn't said a word publicly. No interviews, no comments, no tweets. People were waiting for her to respond, to go on national TV, to call for his disbarment. But she didn't. Instead, she went to work. At the city courthouse, her name wasn't on the door. Not yet, but every clerk, every bailiff, every intern knew who she was. They called her the future judge. Smart, ethical, fierce. And when she entered the chambers that week, the whispers followed. Her. Is that her? She's the one from the video, right? Did you see how calm she stayed? She ignored it all, focused on her cases, spoke with dignity, and walked with the same quiet power that had brought Mark Donnelly to his knees. But one person couldn't stay quiet. Her father. Justice Daniels wasn't just a father. He was a legend, respected across party lines, feared by unethical prosecutors, and admired by law students across the country. When a reporter caught up with him outside the courthouse and asked about the incident, he paused, then said just 5 words. "My daughter handled it perfectly." That was all. No anger, no attack. Just the weight of confidence in his child's strength. Back at his penthouse, Mark was spiraling. He hadn't touched his scotch. He hadn't called his usual weekend date. Instead, he sat in front of his laptop, rewatching the video someone had, taken from the boutique. He winced at his own voice. You might want to try somewhere more affordable. He closed the laptop. Shame burned through him like acid. Then something snapped. He decided to fix it. Not to clear his name, but maybe, just maybe, to do what he should have done in the first place. It wasn't public. No cameras. No social media. Just a letter. Handwritten. Delivered to the courthouse. It read, "Miss Daniels, I cannot undo my words. I cannot erase your experience, but I can say I was wrong. I misjudged you. I disrespected you, and I revealed more about myself than I ever intended. I hope someday you'll accept this apology. But even if you don't, I will spend the rest of my life becoming the kind of man who deserves forgiveness, Mark Donnelly." She read the letter in silence, folded it, put it in her drawer, and said nothing. Because sometimes silence speaks louder than outrage. 2 weeks later, her office got an invitation from Donnelly and Shaw to speak at their annual Equity and Inclusion event. Everyone expected her to decline, but she didn't. She accepted. What happened at that event? Why did she walk into the lion's den? What did she say in front of the firm that tried to humiliate her? And why did her words that day go viral across the legal world? Let's find out. Would you have accepted that invitation? Drop your thoughts in the comments and tell us where you're watching from. She didn't wear a power suit that day. She didn't show up in designer heels. She didn't come in to prove anything. She didn't have to. She walked into the Donnelly and Shaw Equity event, dressed exactly the way she had that day in the boutique. Simple, elegant, natural. A reminder, not of revenge, but of grace. The firm had polished everything. Fresh flowers in the lobby, art installations about diversity, banners quoting civil rights leaders. But no one was looking at the decorations. Everyone was looking at her. They expected a speech. They expected a scolding. They expected fire. What they got was something much deeper. She stood at the podium, not a tremble in her voice, not an ounce of bitterness. She didn't start with anger. She started with a question. What does it cost to be seen? Silence. That's not rhetorical, she continued. What does it cost a black woman to walk into a space and be treated as if she belongs? What toll does it take day after day to constantly have to prove that your presence is not a mistake? A few heads bowed. Some shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Then she did what no one expected. She didn't talk about the suit. She talked about the stories we don't tell. She spoke of the first time she saw her father in court, arguing a civil rights case with tears in his eyes and a fire in his voice. She spoke of her mother, a community nurse who was once mistaken for a janitor in her own clinic. She spoke of her brother, stopped and searched 6 times in one summer on his way to work. And then she spoke about Mark Donnelly, not to humiliate him, not to shame him, but to hold up a mirror. Bias isn't always loud, she said. Sometimes it wears a suit. Sometimes it uses polite language. Sometimes it even believes it's doing the right thing, but it still cuts, and it still costs. People were crying now, even partners. And Mark, he sat in the back row, silent, swallowed by the weight of what he didn't see until it was too late. She looked directly at him once, not with anger, not with pride, with clarity, and then she closed with this. I'm not here to cancel anyone. I'm here because you invited me, because even the deepest wounds can teach us something if we're willing to sit with a discomfort. Thunderous applause, a standing ovation. But she didn't stay for photos. She didn't linger for handshakes. She didn't smile for the press. She walked out the way she walked in, calm, centered, clear, and just like that, the narrative shifted. That speech went viral, not because it was flashy, but because it was real. Clips spread across LinkedIn, Twitter, YouTube. Law students quoted her. DEI consultants used her talk as training material. And corporations, real corporations, started rethinking their strategies. But something else happened too. Mark Donnelly, disgraced, suspended, humiliated, did something no one expected. He reached out again. Not to her, but to himself. He started going to schools in Harlem. Not as a lawyer, as a volunteer. He taught mock trial, classes to teens who looked nothing like him. He shared his story honestly. The good, the bad, the ugly, and slowly, something shifted. Because redemption doesn't happen on camera. It happens when no one is watching. But just when the dust seemed to settle, an unexpected letter arrived at the courthouse. Not for her, for her father. And what it revealed would pull the rug out from under everything they thought they knew. It wasn't about the suit. It wasn't about Mark. It was about a secret buried deep in the past. A secret that connected both families. It came in an envelope that looked ordinary. No wax seal, no lawyer's stamp. Just paper, ink, truth. It was delivered to Judge Daniels' chambers early on a Monday morning. The bailiff almost tossed it with the junk mail. But something about the handwriting, firm, aged, trembling, stopped him. He placed it gently on the judge's desk and walked away. The judge was preparing for a heavy week of court proceedings when he saw it. He almost didn't open it, almost dismissed it, until he turned it over and saw one line written on the back. "Forgive me, I've kept this too long." He opened it, and the moment he read the first line, the ground beneath everything he thought he knew began to crack. "Dear Justice Daniels, you don't know me, but once a long time ago you should have," he read on, and with every line his hands trembled, his breath caught. His past unfolded like a story he never agreed to be part of. "I was young. I made mistakes. I denied a truth I didn't want to face. But your daughter, she deserves to know what I failed to say out loud back then." The judge stopped reading, closed the letter, sat back in his chair, and stared out the window, because the man who had written this was not a stranger. It was someone he once trusted, someone who decades ago had been a friend who disappeared after law school, a friend who had, without explanation, cut all ties. His name, Stephen Donnelly, the father of Mark Donnelly. Years ago, long before suits and gavels and power, Justice Daniels and Stephen Donnelly were inseparable. Two brilliant black law students, best friends, dreamers, fighters. But they took very different paths. Daniels stayed the course. Public service, the courts, justice. Stephen, he ran, first to private, law, then into silence. He changed his last name to Donnelly after marrying into a wealthy Irish-American family. He abandoned everything, including a daughter he never claimed. That letter held the truth. The ugly truth. The one no courtroom could have forced into daylight. Mark Donnelly's father was the biological father of another child. A daughter, a black daughter. The same daughter Mark had insulted in that boutique. The same daughter he didn't know was his half-sister. She was his sister, and neither of them had a clue until now. Judge Daniels didn't tell her immediately. He sat on the information, held it like fire in his chest, consulted no one, trusted no one, until one night he called her into his study. She thought it was about a case, or a recommendation, or politics. But what she got was the truth. He didn't sugarcoat it. He didn't dramatize it. He read her the letter, word for word. She sat in silence, not even blinking. When he finished, she spoke only once. "So that man is my half-brother?" He nodded. She stood up, walked to the window, and whispered, "He looked at me with hate, but part of him is me." The next day, Mark Donnelly received a phone call from a blocked number. He almost didn't pick up, but something told him he should. He answered. It was her. Her voice was steady. "We need to talk, not as judge's daughter and disgraced lawyer, but as something else, something older, something deeper." He didn't understand. Until she said the next line, "Stephen Donnelly is my father too." He couldn't breathe. The silence that followed was louder than any courtroom gasp. They met in the city park. No cameras, no headlines, just two people, two strangers, bound by blood, separated by decisions. She brought the letter. Let him read it with his own eyes. He read it slowly, twice, then stared into nothing. "I've been cruel to you," he said finally. "You didn't know," she replied. "I should have," he whispered. They sat in silence for minutes that felt like lifetimes. Then she said, "You wanted to judge me. But the truth is, part of me is what you've always been running from." And just as they began to process what this all meant, a third figure appeared. An old man, thin, pale, unsteady, Stephen Donnelly. He had come to face them both. But what he said next would ignite a storm that would shake both families and threaten to tear apart what little peace they had built. Seemed the truth is finally out, but the consequences have only just begun. What would you do if you found out your worst enemy was your sibling? Comment your thoughts. Stephen Donnelly came slowly, one step at a time. The man whose name once opened doors, now just a man chasing the shadows of choices made decades ago. He stood before them, eyes dimmed with age, knees weakened by time, yet carrying a weight heavier than years' regret. The air between them wasn't just thick. It was loaded. With questions, with hurt, with blood. He looked at the woman he had never fathered, never held, never claimed, and then at the man who bore his name, who had carried his entitlement like armor, unaware of the full story behind the blood in his veins. And then with a voice cracked by memory, he said, "I failed both of you." No one responded. Because sometimes silence is the most honest reaction. He sat on the bench beside them, eyes facing the lake, hands folded, trembling, and he told them everything. He told them how, as a young man, he'd loved a black woman, a brilliant, fierce, stunning law student, but he'd also feared what the world would think, feared what his own family would do, feared what his white in-laws would say when they learned he had fathered a black child before marrying into wealth. So he ran, signed papers, buried the truth, and built a new life, a safer one, a whiter one. But no matter how far he ran, the shame followed. He confessed to watching her grow from a distance, to seeing her win debate tournaments, graduate from law school, clerk under the very judge he once studied beside. He confessed to watching Mark rise too, spoiled, shielded, clueless to the cost others paid to get where he was, born into. And he confessed that when the story of the suit incident broke, he saw it and knew the pain he caused had returned to teach his son what he himself had run from. "This was never about a suit," he whispered. "It was about what I stitched, together with lies." She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She stood, looked Stephen Donnelly in the eye and said, "You don't get to fix this in one afternoon. You don't get to walk into my life now that it's neat and polished. But I'll tell you what you do get. You get to live with what I became without your help. You get to know that the woman your son disrespected is the same woman you denied, and yet I still rose. And you get to know that I'm not bitter, because I refuse to let your shame define my light." And she turned to walk away. But before she could go, Mark stood up too. This time different. No arrogance, no condescension. Just a man broken open. "I was raised on silence," he said, "on pretending we were better, on never being questioned. And the first time I met truth, I tried to insult it." He stepped closer to her. "You didn't just humble me. You woke me up. I can't undo what I said in that store. But maybe we can figure out what this means, as siblings, as people." She looked at him, and for the first time, saw him not as the man who tried to humiliate her, but as someone learning, painfully, slowly, sincerely. She nodded once. It didn't happen overnight. Forgiveness is not an event. It's a journey. Over the months that followed, they began to speak. At first, awkwardly, then with warmth. They shared memories they never had together. Old photos, court cases, childhood fears. Mark stepped down from his firm. He began a nonprofit for underrepresented law students, not for clout, not for redemption, but for legacy. She became a judge. Not just any judge, one known for her balance, her fire, her fairness. When she gave her first official address, she said, "Justice is not just a robe, it's a mirror, and we must be willing to look into it, even when we don't like what we see." And in the crowd, Mark, Stephen, her father, side by side, not perfect, but present. The next time you're tempted to judge someone by their appearance, pause, because the person you're underestimating might be your reflection or worse, your sibling. What's your biggest takeaway from this entire journey? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe. Tell us where you're watching from. Our global community matters. And remember, respect costs nothing, but disrespect, sometimes it costs everything.